This is the September 25th, 2024 meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge, and it's being broadcast via Zoom. And Ms. Steinley, will you please read the Zoom statement?
Yes, thank you. This meeting of the Municipal Land Use Board of the Borough of River Edge is being held remotely and recorded via Zoom due to Borough Council Chambers unavailability and is in compliance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act and associated regulations. Notice of this remote meeting was published in the Bergen Record, posted on the front doors of Borough Hall, and posted on the borough's website. The notice included the dial and login information necessary for public participation and access to this meeting remotely. A copy of the agenda for this meeting was made available on the borough's website near the posting of the meeting notice and included the dial and login information. During the public comment period of this meeting, if you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand button on Zoom or dial *9 on your telephone keypad to raise your hand. The board will address you by name or the last 4 digits of your telephone number. You may mute and unmute yourself by pressing the microphone icon on Zoom or dialing *6 on your telephone keypad. You must state your name and address prior to making a public comment.
Will we have roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mayor is excused.
I just want to put on the record that he can't be here tonight because he has a conflict. He's had to cover the traffic and safety meeting tonight.
Oh, okay. All right, so the mayor is excused. Mr. Caslin is also excused. Ms. Boland is absent at the moment. Mr. Merman?
Here.
Mr. Pfeffer?
Here.
Mr. Cray?
Here.
Mr. Canigo?
Here.
Councilman Glass?
Yeah, Marina, did you hear what I said about the mayor? I think my Wi-Fi dropped out.
Oh, yep, we heard, and he'll be excused tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Gibbons?
Here.
And Mr. Bastide is absent at the moment. Also present, our board planner, Mr. Behrens, our board engineer, Mr. Costa, and the zoning officer, Mr. Depkin.
Good. Okay, so we'll move on. We have some housekeeping to do. There's no correspondence, and we'll move to the approval of minutes. We have the 8/28/24 minutes available, and we can discuss and vote on those if as needed. I will state that it would have been nice to have them in time for the 9/11 cannabis sweet spot meeting. However, if somebody has comments, please comment on the minutes, and we'll go forward from there. Not hearing any comments, I'll accept the motion to accept them.
So moved.
Mr. Cray with the motion.
Second.
Second from Mr. Gibbons. And the councilman was not present at that meeting, so we can just do a voice vote.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, let's move on to the next set of meetings. We have the 9/11/24 minutes are available. Does anybody have any comments on those? All right. Not hearing any, I'll accept the motion to accept them.
So moved. Second.
I got a motion from Mr. Cray and second from Mr. Gibbons. And Mr. or Councilman Glass was also excused from that meeting, so we can just do a voice vote with the
Okay.
other members.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So we're done with that one. We also have, on the business section, the memorialization of, Sweet Spot River Edge LLC. And apparently that's not ready, at present. So, that's correct, Miss Marina?
Yes,
Is that
correct.
re-
That'll
okay.
be at the next meeting.
Okay, very good. All right. Moving right along. So we're gonna go to the completeness review for Quality Home Developers LLC, 312 Webb Avenue, block 302, lot 1. This is a proposed subdivision that plans 2 lots, and it needs a review by the land use board for compliance with the requirements of the Borough Code Chapter 350 site plan review. We're going to look at the acceptance, the completion first. Marina, you wanted to review the mailings and so forth?
So the mailings were provided by the applicant's attorney, and they were acceptable for the board to have jurisdiction over the application tonight, but that is separate from completeness, just so everyone's aware.
Okay, anything from you on completeness?
No, not at this time.
No, okay. Anything from Mr. Costa's office regarding completeness?
Mr. Chairman, good evening, members of the board, good evening. Yeah, just for the record, so Tom Barrett, Marina, myself, I think Greg from my office, and I think that was basically it on a conference call this afternoon. So the thing is this, the applicant has submitted basically a sketch plat to the board, and under the ordinance 366, they're requesting a waiver from that. And then basically 2 things, if I could just read it into the record. So it's a minor subdivision if this board says it's a minor subdivision. That's the first thing. And if you go into the definition under 366-4, minor subdivision, and basically any subdivision containing not more than 3 lots fronting on an existing minor street, not involving any new street or road or the extension of municipal facilities, and not adversely affecting the development of the remainder of the parcel or adjoining property, and that's the question, and not in conflict with any provision or portion of the master plan, official map, chapter 416, zoning, or this chapter. So basically, in my opinion, what that says is that you need to show these things, but they're requesting waivers from it. And the only people that can actually allow that to happen is the complement of the board, or the approval of the board in a majority vote, I would imagine. I'll go back to Marina. So that's the question. And until the board does that, technically, if you don't grant it, then the application is incomplete, and it would have to come back with the revised plans in accordance with the chapter. So I don't know if everybody understands that, and if I'm 100% wrong, Marina, just jump in.
No, no, that's accurate. So the applicant submitted the subdivision plan and is asking for waivers from the specific requirements of the Borough Code. And the board has to decide that tonight by granting the completeness with the waivers.
Okay, Mr. Behrens,
Good evening, board members. Yes, Mr. Merman, as Mr. Costa stated, we had a conversation earlier today just to try to understand the requirements of the ordinance. I'm generally in agreement with his interpretation of the ordinance. And so the specific waivers, I think that the applicant has to request from the board are one, sorry, I'm just reading my notes here. One, structures within 200 feet of the property. Another pertains to the location of utility connections, as well as stormwater improvements. And then finally, it requires that the building envelope be drawn accurately on the subdivision, which at this juncture, the property currently has the address on Webb Avenue, and the address for the corner lot actually dictates where the building envelope can be placed, because the address dictates where the rear yard and the side yard would be. And essentially, they sort of have it flipped at the moment. And so that's another piece of information that would have to be corrected. But as far as I can tell, at minimum, it's at least those three things.
Okay.
And Mr. Merman, if I may, Mr. Behrens and Mr. Costa, do you have objections to the board granting those waivers?
Not that I have objections to it. Again, here's basically the ordinance says that the planning board has to look at all these things, and it actually says that it has to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public and the residents. I think it even goes on to say the residents of River Edge. There's also another section, because when we hung up today, Greg and I went through this pretty closely, just to make sure we didn't miss anything. Whereas under D, so it's under, let me just give you the right citation. 366-14, which is the design standards, and it goes A, B, C, and D, E, and it keeps going, but it has to meet the requirements of the design standards if you don't grant the waivers. One of it says where there is a question as to the suitability of a lot or lots for their intended use due to the factors such as rock formation, flood conditions, or similar circumstances, the planning board may, after adequate investigation, withhold the approval of the lots. So that's in there. It also says that these rules, regulations, and standards shall be considered the minimum requirements for the protection of the public health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the borough of River Edge. And again, the planning board may permit the variances. The planning board can basically, they need to you guys need to vote whether or not you want to do that. One other caveat. If it is approved, if you grant the waivers and it is ultimately approved because it is as of right because of the sizes, they would still have to come back under soil moving, believe it or not, to this board, because there wouldn't be an existing condition. There would be, if they decide to build, they would actually need to seek approval from the planning board for soil movement. So at some point in the future, if they decided, okay, we're going to subdivide it, we're not going to sell the house, or the lots rather, they're going to sell them or they're going to develop them, they still need to come back to this board for soil movement and then provide all that information under the soil movement.
But that's not what we're here for tonight.
But again, you'd be hearing it and then they would be coming back before they could actually build anything. So the question is,
That's only if they move 100 yards or more, right?
no. The way the soil ordinance is written, it's existing
No.
addition. It's not new. So it
Well,
wouldn't be,
that would have to be worked out later. So that's not what's before the board tonight.
right. That's it. Other than that, that would be it.
Okay, Ms. Stein,
Yep.
recognizing the waivers that are required, can we move ahead with the application? Completeness sufficient to move ahead with the application, and during the review of the application include the discussion of the waivers and approval and testimony and so forth.
So right now, Mr. Barrett is asking for a waiver from complying with these requirements at the time of completeness. Okay. that doesn't mean that as a condition of approval, the board can't ask that he provide all these requirements in the plot plan and the final subdivision plan. So that, we're just at so if the board presents a motion right now, it would be a motion to accept the waivers for the purpose of completeness.
Okay, and then we can further discuss them later. Is that the merits of them? Is that it?
Essentially, unless Mr. Barrett has an objection to
Okay.
that.
All right, okay. So,
Mr. Mayor? I mean, very recently, we've sent people back to give us more exact plans before we hear any arguments. I'm not comfortable granting waivers without knowing, where we're going with this. So we have some concerns from our professionals. I'd rather have all the information we can before we hear anything.
Yeah, and I'll go one step further. The way that ordinance was written, what Mr. Costa read us, it sounds like the people who wrote that ordinance went out of their way to say these are the minimal requirements. So I don't think we should be so quick to just set them aside. We have our procedure here in River Edge. It's spelled out. I think we should follow it.
Yeah, because I think there's some concerns on that property anyway with, potential drainage problems. And I think we need to have all the information we can before we're granting waivers for something like this.
Mr. Chairman? Question.
yes,
Can we, would it be appropriate to hear from Mr. Barrett to clarify why the waiver issue has to be decided in conjunction with the completeness issue?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it does, Mr. Pfeffer. I think that the board can deem the application complete, and as was suggested, that during the course of the hearings, if in fact more information is required to enable it to make the appropriate determination, certainly we'll provide that additional information. I think we need to keep in mind that what we're talking about are the creation of two conforming lots. They meet the standards of the ordinance. They're 75 by 100 feet. With respect to the address issue, I spoke to Neil Carroll yesterday, who in conjunction with the tax assessor, James Anzavino, handles the assignment of addresses. He indicated to me that it's not an issue. They will simply issue 6th Avenue addresses for both lots, thereby alleviating one of Mr. Barron's concerns. So I don't know if that's putting the cart before the horse or what, but I mean, again, if the board were to ultimately deem it appropriate to issue an approval conditioned on the addresses being 6th Avenue addresses, that's certainly acceptable, and I think that's been done in the past. I think that the waivers, I think we need to really focus on what they say, and that is all existing structures within the portion to be subdivided. That's been shown, and they're all going to be removed anyway in order to create vacant land. And also, when deemed necessary by the planning board, all existing structures within 200 feet of the portion to be subdivided. So again, if the board feels it necessary in the course of the hearing to know all of the houses within 200 feet, then so be it. Then we'll have those drawn to the best of our ability. Now, we have to realize that we are not entitled to enter onto other people's property to depict with 100% certainty the location of their house, garage, what have you. So, I don't know how exactly accurate it would be, but nevertheless, if necessary, we would make our best effort to do so. Similarly, the second waiver is from the requirement for the location of existing and proposed property lines that we have. Also, the location of existing streets that we have. It's on the northwest corner of Webb and 6th Avenue. Wooded areas and rock formations. This is on a 15,000 square foot piece of property we're talking about. and all streets, roads, streams, and wooded areas within 200 feet of the subdivision. This is an entirely developed neighborhood. There are no wooded areas. To my knowledge, there are no streams. I can't say that with absolute certainty, but I don't recall any streams in that area. And the streets and the roads are there. There's no changes that are occurring. We're talking about taking a piece of property, dividing it in half, end of story, going then to get a building permit on which certain requirements have to be met, one of which may well be a soil movement permit, which then, as Mr. Costa says, may be required to come back before this board. But I think the simple question before the board is, are you going to deny the division of the property into two conforming lots, which the law says that my client is entitled to have those two lots? I think all the other information is basically there. I don't know of any bridges in the area. There may be a culvert. There are certainly drain pipes. They're in the road. We have sewers and sanitary sewers and storm sewers. They're in the road there. This area was developed 70 years ago, 80 years ago, in the 40s, I think. So 80 years ago. All that stuff's there. Anyway, I think you should deem it complete and we should move on.
Just for the record, looking at Google Earth, there is a brook within about a block of the house.
Okay,
And
thank you.
there is an area that I would kind of say is wooded off 8th Avenue. So
All
if
right,
that's what our ordinance requires, again,
Well, certainly we can locate the brook.
So if I may, the issue about granting waivers for completeness purposes is saying, yes, the applicant hasn't met the exact criteria of what's in the ordinance, but can the board still understand the application before it? And if you feel that you can understand the application based on what's presented so far, then it might then you might feel comfortable granting the waivers and approving completeness. Mr. Barrett's already stated that as a condition, he would provide all the additional information if needed or during the course of the actual hearing. So that's what the board has to decide now, is just whether what's been provided is complete and whether you can accept the waivers for the purpose of completeness.
So can we just have our professionals just advise us as such? I mean, I heard hesitation, so if they can just say, go ahead and do it, board, I'd feel more comfortable.
Mr. Costa, you want to comment on that?
Basically, Mr. Chairman, again, I think my opinion, submit all the information because I think based on where it is, submit the information that's required in the ordinance. And come back, have it, and then deem it complete at that point. That's my professional opinion. That's my personal opinion. Show us what you're doing, because again, the other side of the coin is the lots basically have their slope. They go from, just use a number from 0 in the street to -10 towards the back of the lot. So there could be required retaining walls. There could be other stuff required that actually this ordinance talks about. If there is retaining walls. Also, I said to Mr. Barrett, not that I want to play attorney, but I don't believe he even, our ordinance does not, it talks about a minor subdivision, it talks about a major subdivision. When you read it very closely, it talks about sketch plat, preliminary plat, and final plat. So I don't think you even put an application in for all of those. So you'd have to come back anyway, even if the board said, okay, approve this lots. That's what it said.
This is a minor subdivision.
But it doesn't, you still have to put the requirements in of what it says, and it doesn't differentiate minor from major. It doesn't. I
understand that, and that's why they're asking for the waivers for the requirements of the preliminary plat and the 200 foot, the structures within 200 feet.
I don't, Ms. Barrett, did you do that?
Do what?
a waiver from asking for a preliminary and final subdivision?
I asked for subdivision approval. Mr. Costa, your comments tonight fly in the face of your September 16th letter, and I will read one sentence of it. At this time, we recommend the application be deemed complete, period.
And I,
So,
and I
yeah, I
issued
don't
a
know what
supplement, I issued with all due respect, because I certainly don't want to fight. I don't want to,
Well, this is what your report says.
but quite frankly, let the board vote. You've heard my opinions. I've read the ordinance closely. I issued a supplemental letter. And in my opinion, based on what this board has done in the past, subdivision on Howland Avenue, showed a house, showed walls, showed grading, showed drainage. And if you look very closely and read this ordinance, that's what's required. If the board wants to waive it, and if you felt you've noticed properly what you're requesting, then the board can vote on it. That's it. You've heard my opinion. I think the information should be given to the board and the public. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less.
Just one point, that the subdivision on Howland Avenue required variances. That falls within the definition of a major subdivision according to the River Edge ordinance. This subdivision does not require any variances. I mean, that's one of the differences between those two
Again,
developments.
I don't know the homes you're building. I don't know if the homes require variances. I don't know any of the above.
Well, again, that would be determined when they apply for a building permit. If they apply for a permit which requires a variance, they have to come back to the board to get the variance. But if they apply for a building permit, I don't know the exact procedures that are followed between you and Mr. Depkin, but if you deemed it necessary that there be drainage facilities to develop a lot, if this lot stood alone and somebody came in for a building permit, you don't send them to the board to determine whether or not they need a retaining wall. You and Mr. Depkin working together determine what is necessary before the permit is issued. That's exactly what we have here. We're going to have 2 vacant lots on which 2 single-family houses are going to be erected, for which they have to get building permits. Is that not part of the building permit review process to determine whether or not drainage is required?
Mr. Barrett, I think we understand your point. The councilman has his hand raised.
I'm gonna go off camera because my Wi-Fi is not that good and I think I'll get better audio if I go off camera. This is really for the board. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I agree with Mr. Costa. Let me explain why. If we don't have a complete survey, we don't even know what we're not getting. Right? We don't even know what's missing. We don't even know what we're waiving unless we have a complete survey. And like Mr. Chenango said and Mr. Gibbons said, there's a reason why we have those requirements in our ordinance. So I'm concerned that if we don't have a complete survey, we don't even know what we're missing. And until the application's complete, it shouldn't be deemed complete.
Just to clarify, the applicant did provide a survey of the property of existing.
No, I'm saying a
conditions.
survey that meets, no. Marina, I'm saying a survey that meets all the requirements in the ordinance. Right? That doesn't permit anything that they're requesting to be waived.
Okay, Mr. Barron's. Let's hear from you.
Sorry, just trying to find the mute button here. So, I understand the issue. On the one hand, the application is fairly simple, trying to subdivide the parcel into 2 seemingly conforming parcels. But on the other hand, we do have this element of required information, and just rereading the definition of minor subdivision, it talks about any subdivision containing not more than 3 lots and not adversely affecting the development of the remainder of the parcel or adjoining property. So the question is, does the board have enough information to understand that if these are developed, and it's understood that that's the intent, right, to create 2 new building lots, that we can allow the subdivision to move forward with, and believe that it will not adversely impact the neighbors, recognizing the topographic conditions, tree removal, et cetera. So that seems to be the issue at hand, not just merely the new invisible line that's created, but how this plays out and what gets developed. And do we have enough information to ensure that there's no adverse impacts to surrounding property?
Okay, thank you. So, Marina.
Yep.
I guess we're at the point where I think we have to put this to the vote of the board as to completeness and providing all the
May I
information
make a
as,
statement?
go ahead.
Mr. Durkin.
As far as this application, the beginning of this, it's a conforming lot that is being subdivided into conforming lots. The fact that they have to come back for soil moving because the projects that go on those properties will be over 100 cubic yards. And at that point, all the questions that you're bringing up would be brought at that time. So I think a stipulation stating that they would have to come back to the board, which states over 100 cubic yards, I think can all be addressed. I think all they're looking for now is a subdivision of that lot. And as far as drainage, retaining walls, things like that, that all comes into play when the proposed structures are being proposed to go on those lots.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Merman,
Yes,
so a couple of thoughts here. First of all, we have our procedures here, and I think as a land use board, we've said over and over, we'd like them followed. This is not the first time that they're not followed, and it's not the first time that we're gonna send the applicants back, possibly, to get us the documents that should have been submitted in the first place. And I'd like, future applicants to know that they should submit all the documents that are required in the first place. We don't want to grant waivers. We want everything before us. Secondly, we don't know how these constructions may affect adjoining properties. And some of this information may be gleaned from what is missing here. And that's at least what I've heard here. And I think that's important because we don't want to just right now willy-nilly say, yes, we're going to waive and we're going to listen, we're going to grant. And then all of a sudden the project is already proceeding, but it affects adjoining property owners. And now, well, why were these waivers granted? Then people will look to us. Why are you just granting them? If it says in the ordinance itself, these are minimum requirements. And if they're not minimum requirements, why are we making some people jump through the hoops and not others? If this was just one question that we were talking about, it would be okay, perhaps. But it seems it's at least 3 or 4 different questions. So that's my take on this. Thank you.
Mr.
okay,
Chairman,
thank you. Go ahead.
I don't disagree with what Mr. Chinigo is saying in principle, but I think that we're sort of blending or confusing 2 different issues. On the one hand, we want to be able to ask as many questions as we have of the applicants and get as much information from the applicant to assure that we can be comfortable with approving the application. And if after the process of asking all these questions and hearing testimony, we decide that we don't have that assurance and we're not comfortable approving the application, then we vote no, or we send them back to get more information. But the first issue, which I think is a separate issue, is whether there's enough information just for the application to be heard. Is there documentation before us that tells us very clearly what the application is? That to me is what completion is all about. Do we have enough information to understand what the application is? If so, then we approve completeness, and then we go on to the second phase, which is to elicit testimony, ask questions, gather information, and then decide, is this an application that is worth approving or rejecting, or that we want to set conditions on approval, or do we want still more information at that point? So, my view of this is that it's better for us to have an informed decision, an informed hearing. We have the applicant. The applicant, I assume, has witnesses here to talk to us about the application. And then we can make a decision at that point, rather than just say, we have a lot of questions, we don't have enough information, where the documents are not clear, and so go back and get more. Because what's going to happen is they're going to go back and get more, and they're going to submit more information, and we're still going to have a hearing and question them and get testimony before we can decide. So why not do that now? If at least we can understand what the application is about, then let's go forward. Let them give their testimony, let them give their evidence, let them make their arguments, and then we can decide, is that sufficient to approve it, or do we need more? That's my view of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, now it's my turn. I visited this site several times. I've walked the site personally. I've also driven the neighborhood. I've also been a resident of River Edge for over 40 years and have dealt with a lot of the improvements of River Edge. I'm also a licensed engineer, all right, in the state of New Jersey. It's my opinion that we should hear this application and compile what we want additionally, and they'll come back and provide that. And that's the route I think we should go tonight. I think it's kind of sort of foolish not to. We can still ask for what we want, and they'll come back with it. But not to go forward, I think, is it's not the proper thing to do. So I've said my piece, and I guess my question to Marina Steinle is, where do we go from here?
The councilman has his hand raised, and then I can explain.
Okay.
I just have a procedural question. Are there people in the public at this meeting?
Yeah, there are 7 members of the public here.
Okay, so
well,
I'm just
I think
wondering, will there
5.
be a point where they're allowed to speak before there's any type of vote?
Not for completeness. This is not a public issue.
Okay, I mean, to what Mr. Pfeffer said, I understand your point, but again, this is a vote or a determination related to completeness. We heard from both of our professionals about whether the application is complete or not. So we have to make a decision as to whether we want to waive requirements in our ordinance. And my concern again is that this thing could advance without us knowing something that should have been submitted. That's the purpose of requiring a complete application, so that you have all the information. And sometimes, like Mr. Pfeffer said, maybe we can go backwards and require something, but maybe we can't. And I don't think we want to, in my opinion, I recommend not taking that risk and requiring a complete application. Otherwise, again, who knows what we don't know as this thing advances.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So now, Marina, we're back to my
Yes.
question.
So I just need a motion to deem the application complete and grant the waivers or not. So if someone wants to make the motion, then we'll take a vote.
Well, I move we accept the application as complete.
All right, so I have a motion from Mr. Cray that it's complete and authorize the waivers.
Yes.
Okay. A second,
I'll second it.
second from Mr. Pfeffer. All right. Mr. Merman,
Yes,
Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
Mr. Cray,
Yes.
Mr. Kanigo. Oh, you're muted.
Yes.
All right, Councilman Glass,
So,
Mr. Gibbons?
No.
Okay, the motion passes.
Okay. So then we'll move on. With the application. I guess, the applicant, can present, their case. I assume, Mr. Barrett, that you're representing the applicant.
Correct, Mr. Merman.
Would you like to present your case and we'll move on now?
Certainly. At this point, I would like to call upon Mr. Michael, who is the principal of the company which owns the property, just to give a broad overview of his intent. And then we're going to call upon Mr. McClellan, who's our professional engineer, as to the drawings that he has performed to date.
All right, Mr. Michael, if you please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, please state your name, spell your last name, and provide your address for the record.
Sure. First name is David, last name is Michael, Michael. I live at 906 Lotus Avenue in Oradell, New Jersey.
And Mr. Michael, you are the only member of the LLC which owns the property?
Correct.
And can you tell the board your intent, if the subdivision is granted, how you'll develop the property?
At this moment, since we don't know if it was granted or not, we don't really have an idea of what size homes are going to be placed on there. So for now, we're just looking for the subdivision. And then from there, we'll conform with all the requirements from the building department and the zoning.
So it is your intent to comply with all of the relevant ordinances controlling the development of the property in that zone?
Correct.
So there'll be no request for any side yard variances, front yard variances? There'll
No.
be full compliance with all of the setbacks?
Yes.
And similarly with the lot coverage, the percentages that are applicable to the development?
Correct.
And there's a new ordinance in place, I know you and I have discussed it, setting aside a portion of the property for improvements, patios, things of that nature. There'll
Correct.
be compliance with that as well.
Yes.
So it's your intent to build a fully compliant home on each of the lots.
Correct.
And of course, in that regard, when you submit your plans to the building department, if in fact then a soil movement permit is required, you'll obviously comply with that, and if necessary, come back before the board.
Yes.
So you haven't done any studies yet as to whether or not what type of drainage will be required, or whether or not you'll need a retaining wall or any of that.
I'll have to defer to the engineer on that information.
All right. I have nothing further of Mr. Michael. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want me to proceed with Mr. McClellan, and then Mr. Michael obviously is going to stay and answer questions after the engineer's presentation, or you want to ask him questions now, whatever the board's pleasure.
Let's hear from your engineer.
Okay.
All right, Mr. McClellan, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name, spell your last name, provide your address for the record.
Sure, it's Sean McClellan. Last name is McClellan. Business address is 84 Gettysburg Way, Lincoln Park, New Jersey.
And could you provide the board with some background and on your qualifications and that your license is still in good standing?
Sure. I graduated from New Jersey Institute of Technology in 1997 with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. I've been a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey since 2004. Testified at boards in front of Hudson, Bergen, Essex, Passaic, and Morris counties, as well as in front of this board many times. And my license is still in good standing.
Thank you.
Mr. McClellan, so you had the opportunity to draw the sketch plat required by the borough's ordinance,
I did.
and maybe you could show, do you have a share the screen and show the plat?
Sure. Just let me know when you can see that.
Okay, it's up.
Yep, we can see it.
So it's just go through real quickly. Minor subdivision is the title. It's dated July 22nd, 2024. Last revised August 27th, 2024.
And you,
I'm gonna. Did I think that this was submitted previously to the board, the revised, yeah, August.
yes,
25th. Okay.
perhaps we should mark that though as A1.
Sure. I will mark that as A1.
Thank you. So if you perhaps just describe the actual subdivision itself, the proposed subdivision?
Sure. So I'll just briefly go through existing conditions. The property is in the R1 residential zone. Lot area required for the zone is 7,500, and we have 15,000 square feet. So we're 2 times larger than what's required. There's an existing home on the property with a detached garage. The existing home is non-conforming as far as front yard on 6th Avenue. It's only 21.6 feet where 30 feet is required. So the removal of that existing home will eliminate a non-conformity. Simply what we're proposing to do is to cut this lot in half. As I said, it's currently 100 by 150, and we're looking to make 275 by 100 lots that will both be fully conforming. As you can see here, the dark blue around the edges is the existing property line, and the red line here is the subdivision line, creating 2 equal lots. We plan to remove all the structures on the property. Based upon my field investigation, it appears that the existing home does not have any type of drainage system. The homes that we will be proposing, if it's required or not, will both be equipped with stormwater management, most likely some type of seepage pit or a Coltech chamber that will completely eliminate any water from the roofs of the 2 proposed homes to leave the site. That's pretty much it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Based on your observation of the topography of the site, what would the developer be looking at in order to properly develop it, in your opinion?
Sure. So most likely we would have retaining walls along the rear, or it's the west property line, this blue line here, just to help flatten out the area, to provide a more usable rear yard, and at the same time flattening out that area will help reduce the rate that the water comes off the property.
So currently the water drains to the west?
Yeah, so anything that falls on the property drains that way, and also anything that falls on the roof comes down the roof leaders and drains that way too. So the houses that we'd be proposing would be larger than this existing house, and all that water that would fall onto those roofs would be contained, whereas in pre-existing conditions, all that just runs off the property.
And do you have any idea of how high those retaining walls would have to be?
Typically, I would always try and keep them 3 feet. Once you get to 4 feet, you have to provide structural calculations. So you'd have probably a 3 foot. All depends on the house design too. What type of, how many steps that come out of the rear yard, from the first floor down to the patio. That all makes a difference. But just based on this topography, it'd probably be a 3 foot high wall.
And you don't see any issue though, in developing the property so that it would not have any adverse impact on any of the neighbors, whether to the west or to the north?
No, 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 with, with the use of the seepage pits or the Coltech chambers, the amount of water that will run off the property post-construction will be less than runs off the property currently.
Thank you. I have no further questions of Mr. McClellan.
Mr. Barrett, you want to present anybody else?
No, that's all.
Okay, then we can go to the board for questions on the application. Let's start with Mr. Pfeffer. Do you have any questions of the applicant and his professionals?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess this is for Mr. Michael. So first of all, just to clarify, what you're asking the board tonight to approve is strictly subdividing the property for the purpose of constructing 2 single-family homes, one on each part of the subdivided lot. Is that right? You're muted.
That's correct.
And these would each be a single-family home, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And you are aware, are you, that if during the construction of either of these homes or both of these homes, the nature of the construction requires any kind of variance, you will come back to this board to obtain such a variance?
Correct.
And you're obviously going to obtain all necessary buildings permits for this construction, correct?
Yes.
And you are going to work with the borough engineer to make sure that the construction is in compliance with all the building codes regarding drainage or any other soil issue or other construction-related aspects to comply fully with the borough ordinances and laws and requirements. Is that right?
That's correct.
Are there any issues that you foresee right now that you feel you might have to come back to the board with for approval, or is it just premature now to go into that area?
It's a little premature, but I don't foresee any issues with the property. To be honest, I wouldn't have bought the property if there was any variances that would have been required for any of the setbacks.
Okay. Have you already been in some level of communication with the borough planner and the engineer's office?
Not in regards to the construction of the structures, just for the subdivision. And that's through my engineer and my attorney.
Okay. And are you assuring us that that is going to be a continuing dialogue and a continuing process of working with those offices?
This is not my first house in River Edge or let alone in any of the towns in Bergen County. I build quality homes and I want to stick to the setbacks and all the building codes that are in River Edge. So I'm not going to look for anything outside of if there's a variance, I'll comply with whatever the size of the lot is. So that way I don't have to go for a variance.
Can you tell us how many other houses you've built in River Edge?
Sure. There's the one on Wales. I forgot the address. There's also 150 Valley, 163 Valley. I've also done 200 Valley. Quite extensive amount of homes here in River Edge. I was also a resident of River Edge before I got married and moved next town over.
Okay. I have no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeffer. Mr. Cray, any questions of the applicant?
No, I just want to make sure it was clear. You're, and actually, I guess this is really more a question for Engineer McClellan. you build these two structures and you do all the site preparation you talked about, et cetera, your opinion is that this property will have less negative impact on neighboring properties than currently exists, and an improvement in again, whether it's groundwater running off, et cetera, but that there's going to be no negative impact on any of the neighbors.
Oh, Sean, you're muted.
Correct. There'll be no negative impact on the adjoining properties.
I really don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cray. Mr. Chenango, any questions of the applicant?
Thank you.
I didn't hear.
I said no questions. Thank you, Mr. Merman.
Thank you. Councilman Glass. Any questions of the applicant?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure the applicant, Mr. Michael, you're aware of the new ordinance and the new lot coverage restrictions in River Edge. I just want to make, and
Yes.
it's a little bit different because now 5% of the lot coverage has to be reserved for, what is it? Tom, help me out.
Rear yard amenities, so things like patios, decks, sheds, etc. Because homes were being built without them, and then people were coming back to the board requesting variances.
So the lot coverage limits exclusive of that are now 30%. I just want to make sure, Mr. Michael, you're aware of that.
I am aware of that.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Councilman?
No, thank you, Mr. Merrill.
Thank you. Mr. Gibbons.
Thank you. I have a few questions. There are a number of trees. I think I counted 34 or so on the survey. What's to be had with all of the trees with adding 2 properties?
We're going to submit the paperwork required for the shade and tree, and we are in contact with Jason from the office in terms of in regards to the trees that are on the property. And based on the approval of the shade and tree, we'll remove accordingly.
So what is your plan for all those trees?
Those trees, the ones that are inside the building, will be removed. But as you can see from the plot plan, there's not too many inside of the purple line, inside the setbacks of where the structures would be.
So everything within the lines is going to go.
For sure, yes, 100%, unless it's a weed or some kind of invasive species that needs to be removed in accordance to whatever the Shade and Tree Commission discusses with us.
So that goes along with the slope of the property, and I know I've heard from Mr. McClellan that there's going to be no impact, but when I look at that property, it's going right into the neighbors. That dip is going right into the neighbors. And I have a concern with taking out a whole bunch of trees on a fairly, I don't want to call it wooded, but a fairly covered lot with trees. And seeing that slope, I'm saying that there will be no change and that it'll be better is not really reassuring. Seeing the difference in a 10-foot elevation from the front to the back. I'm very concerned that neighbor behind you on Webb, I think it is, it's going to see water. So I know, Mr. McClellan, you've said a couple of times that there won't be, but how do we know that that's the fact? Because we have a lot of water problems in this town, and the more houses like this that go up, the more water problems we have.
Right, so the neighbor behind us in Webb currently is getting all the water from the property, and it's coming down at on a steeper slope at a higher velocity, and it's also getting the water from the existing dwelling. When the proposed dwelling is there, all that roof water will be stored on site, and then we're gonna have a flatter backyard, giving the water more time to collect into the ground, and a slower velocity. So the drainage situation will be much improved.
I guess I'd just like to know exactly what will happen on that property to protect that neighbor back there. Because,
The,
right
so,
now,
yeah, so,
it's a cleared lot for the most part, and now he's gonna have, a house within, I forget what our setback is, but within, 25, 30 feet of his property.
right, so I guess we'll take, let me just share my screen. You're talking about this neighbor here?
Yes,
Okay. So, when it rains, the water falls on this roof, comes shooting down the roof leader onto the ground, and then off the property. So we'll have a house that's, let's see what the square footage of this is. We'll have a house that's larger than this, and it'll be more in this pink lined area, right? So currently the water falls on the roof, goes down the roof layer off the property. When we have a house here, the water will fall on the roof, go down the roof leader, and just get stored in the seepage pit. So that'll be an improved situation. On this lot, you have a garage that does the same thing, and you have, the house will sit somewhere in here. So when it rains, the water goes on the roof of the garage, down the roof leader, off the property. And then in this area, you see how steep it is. Well, we'll have a house here. So, when it rains, at first, the water that goes on the grass seeps into the property. But once that grass gets saturated, then it runs off the property. But with the house there, all that water is going to be contained. Plus, the lot will be leveled off some, giving the water that falls on the grass more time to percolate to the ground and also slow the velocity. So, having the houses there will reduce the amount of water that runs off onto the adjacent property.
I just know every time we put in a new bigger house, the neighbors are always coming back to us telling us that there's more water in their properties. And I'm sure that's why we have 7 people here tonight. Mr. Costa, Mr. Burns, do you have an idea of how tall a retaining wall would need to be in that backyard? I know Mr. McClellan said 3 feet, but do we know how tall? I'm not going to ask for specifics, but a general idea of how big that might need to be?
Well, again, I think it's, if I can, through the chair, until you know the size of the house, the grading in the backyard, where they're putting the wall, how they're gonna do anything, it's all speculation. To make a comment where the drainage is gonna be all good, one question, did you do any soil testing? Do you know the conditions? Do you know anything?
That will, percolation tests will be done.
But I'm saying, you've testified, you're saying it's gonna be better than it is now, this, that. Have you done any of the above?
We have not done a percolation test, no.
Okay, so basically, everything you're saying is quite frankly speculation. Until you do the testing, until you put it in, until you show it, grade it. That's not what we're here for tonight. We're here basically to cut a line down the middle and show 2 lots, that's it.
Agreed. Just trying to answer the questions that are being asked.
Well,
But Mr. Costa, my problem is that we approve this and there are problems that's, then we don't have any purview over it. That's my concern.
well, all I'm saying is the testimony that I listened to is all speculation. That's all, basically, that's it. There's nothing to back it up. As far as the wall's 3 feet, quite frankly, Mr. McKellen, you don't know that until you get the architecturals, what the house size is, how you're gonna grade the backyard, what you're gonna do. As far as the trees,
But wait a second, does any of this have to do with our application tonight? This is just a subdivision, right?
right,
All this
that's-
stuff has to come at the future date when they decide to come and put these much larger houses on this property and come tell us at that
But they
point
won't-
that there's gonna be less water on the others.
But they won't be coming back to us with that, Mr. Kaniga.
Well, I mean,
They won't-
unfortunately,
they
that's the
won't
way
be
our
coming
ordinance is
back. That's the whole
written.
point.
So
That's the point I was trying to make.
All right, let's
They're
let
not
Mr.
coming back because they're too smart to apply for variance.
All right,
And
Mr. Gibbons, you want to continue?
I'm just putting it on record that I'm concerned that this will cause more water problems for the neighbors downstream. And
Okay.
this is my chance to voice that. They won't be coming back before this board. So, we have a job to, protect our town. And that's what I'm trying to do.
and you're right about everything, Ryan. you're right about everything. So I'll support you on that 100%.
Thank you. Those are my real concerns. So,
Okay.
you know, I'm concerned for those neighbors in that area. And, you know, yeah, that's my issues.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
thank you.
can
Go
I-
ahead.
can I just ask a question of Mr. Costa? Because my confusion now is if we say, you know, we're concerned about the water runoff and we're concerned about the retainage wall and we're concerned about what's going to be built there, then to reject the application on that basis means that nothing gets built there. And so my question is, before anything, even if we approve the subdivision, wouldn't the builder still have to go, at least in part, through your office to discuss the drainage and the water control and all of that? And if it wasn't sufficient, in your opinion, you would tell them, no, go back and give me a better plan. Is that how it works, basically?
Correct, but in this case, again, the way I read the ordinance for soil moving, it's not an existing home. I can't waive, I don't believe I can waive jurisdiction. They're gonna come back to this board. That's, again,
Yeah.
reading the ordinance, maybe Mr. Barrett's gonna disagree with me. But again, if the board goes forward on this, you're putting a line on the plan. If this gentleman sells it, does whatever, builds it, they're gonna come back to this board individually for whatever houses and whatever improvements. Where's the soil coming from and how they're doing all the above, where they could have done it in one step. Submitted the information and the board votes and moves on.
But if they didn't,
That's not-
obviously they're not doing that. So, but they can still come back at a later date. Is that what you're saying?
If I read the ordinance correctly, they're coming back at some point in a separate date if they decide to move forward and build. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeffer. Mr. Gibbons, anything else? No?
I'm good right now. Thank you.
You're good right now. Okay, thank you. So I guess I'm the last one. I will say I echo the concerns of the board, but I think right now, we're here for a subdivision of a parcel of land. And I would like to, ask Mr. Michaels, a question or two. You're basically just going for a pure subdivision. We'll have some, caveats on it. But you wanna explain what you're going to do in the once you get the subdivision approval, are you going to remove the existing structures of house and a garage?
We're gonna comply with the building codes of the city of
Okay.
River Edge, whatever is required
No,
for
no,
the
wha-
future structures.
My question is, if you're granted subdivision approval right now, do you plan to right now remove the structures that are there?
Not at the current moment.
Not at the current moment, okay. When you do remove them, obviously, I assume you're gonna remove all those asphalt walkways and so forth that are there, the driveway and all, correct?
If they're not usable for the new project, yes.
Yes, okay. Is it, it's my observation that this dwelling is unoccupied, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, what I would like you to do, is to, secure the building, board it up, because it's right now I foresee it as becoming an attractive nuisance. I would
Okay.
like to see it boarded, so, at least prohibit, entry from whomever, okay? I think
With
that
all due
would be,
respect, would you rather that I just put a black fence around it instead
No,
of making it look like an
no.
abandoned
I
home?
appreciate that, but I would really like to see the doors and the windows, especially on the lower level, secured with plywood or something similar.
Sure.
I think it be a lot better for the community safety of people wandering into it and using it for whatever.
Of course. Upon
Okay.
approval, we'll get that done tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning.
Beautiful. Okay. Ms. Steinley, I think unless Mr. Costa or planner have any further comments, I think maybe we can move to the public comment period.
I do have a couple quick ones, Mr. Merman.
Okay,
You'll
go
indulge
ahead.
me. So, prepared a review memo, which just touches on a few mostly procedural items. One does have to do with the demolition of the structures. That point I tried to make was that the demolition actually has to occur or should occur before the subdivision is perfected. Reason being that if you do it the opposite way and have the subdivision first, technically there would be nothing to compel anyone to knock the structures down. The one existing non-conforming house with the non-conforming front yard setback could in theory be developed. I'm not suggesting that that's the applicant's intent, but again, I think because we don't know who's going to own these or develop these necessarily, that again, the demolition occur before the subdivision be perfected, or some condition similar to, so that we ensure that that actually takes place. Second point, just reading it again on page 2 of my memo, that, you know, these lots are each intended to accommodate one single family dwelling, that the dwellings fit within the character of the neighborhood, and that they also be differentiated somewhat so that they're not identical, you know, with respect to color or, you know, even architectural features. Not that they have to be radically different, but again, not the same exact style of home, being that the lots are going to be the exact same size. With respect to lot orientation, I touched upon the address issue, that be clarified, again, ideally before the subdivision's perfected, so we could understand if the address will be Webb Avenue or 6th Ave, which will dictate the building envelope. The applicant, I believe, Mr. Michael, did you already apply for a tree removal permit?
Yeah,
Okay, and there's,
it's with the shading tree currently.
so it's in review?
Yes.
Okay. With respect to grading, again, it's all speculation at this point. Those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Behrens, are you suggesting that the structure should be removed right now?
I'm not saying right now. I'm just saying that ultimately they be removed before the subdivision is perfected, so that
Okay,
we ensure the existing non-conforming dwelling can't
Right.
be, what's the word, altered and, you know, kept essentially, that we're
Right, okay,
expecting 2 new
okay.
houses to be built. Right.
all right, okay. So with that, we can still move forward with securing the house with boarding and so forth for now.
And
Yes.
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman, if I may, I just confirm
Go
with
ahead.
Ms. Steinley. I believe that to perfect the minor subdivision, we would merely file deeds that are signed by the chairman and the secretary of the board. And I believe it has to be done within 190 days of the approval.
Yes, 190 days, but you could always ask for an extension if you needed additional time.
Right, but in other words, that would be the hammer that the board would have. You simply don't sign off on the deeds unless the structure's been, you know, removed within that time frame.
Yeah, the deeds that are recorded with the county have to be signed by the chairman and the secretary. And if the buildings aren't demolished, then we can't sign off on it.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Ms. Steinley, are we ready to move for public comment?
Yep, I think so.
Okay, would you like to
I'll make that
introduce? Okay, all right, that's right. We need a motion. Very good, Mr. Gibbons. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Thank you.
All right, we
All
do have an all in
Ms.
favor for that?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Fine.
All right, we do have members of the public. If you'd like to make a public comment or ask questions, you can press raise hand or *9 on your telephone keypad. And I do have one here. All right, please
Ms.
state your
Steinle,
name.
Ms. Steinle, before you open it to the public, can you explain to them the rules that we are going to operate under for the public comment?
Oh, yes. So everyone who makes a public comment has to state their name and address. We limit, since there's so many people, we want to accommodate as many people as we can. So avoid duplicative comments and try to keep your comments and questions to under 2 minutes, but we'll give you grace period if you have concerns. Okay.
Thank you.
So our first member of the public, you can speak and just state your name and address for the record.
Hi,
Taku.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Taku Ishizu. I'm owner of 7776 Avenue, north side of the property, concerned property. And thank you for the discussion and explanation from the name, Mr. McLean. Makes sense for about the drainage. And in terms of the west side, but when it comes to, for example, the new development happen the north side, and also the elevation of the land happen on the north side, I have a concern on the new water is coming to the north side as well. So I also want to make sure new water is not coming to our property, so that we can avoid the drainage situation. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
All right, I think that was a question about drainage to the north side of the property. And then if Mr. McClellan wants to respond.
Yeah, so I thought he was making a comment. I didn't realize he was asking a question. North side, yeah. So basically, nothing currently. It doesn't look any drainage from our lot now currently goes to his property, and it will, the plan will be to keep it the same.
All right, any additional members of the public that would like to make a comment or ask questions, please raise your hand on Zoom now. Or on your telephone keypad, you can dial *9. All right. We have
Sorry,
everyone-
this is Taku
Sorry.
again. Based on the sketch, elevation of the land happened on the north property. So obviously new water is coming to north side, even though current water is not coming right now to our property. That's what I'm thinking. What's your observation? Why it doesn't come to north side, even though we pop the land on the side, north side? That is a question to Mr. McLean. Thank you.
I think your question was answered by the engineer. Could we have the next person, please?
All right. Joseph Manzelli, you can state your name and address for the record. Mr. Manzelli? I don't think, we cannot hear you. We'll come back and see if you can check on your microphone. Oh, there was a phone number that had their hand raised, but now their hand's lowered. So if you would like to speak, please, and you're on the phone. Okay, there we go. And then you have to unmute yourself by pressing *6 on your telephone. 0912. Yes, hello. All right, so if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Cindy Bequeath, my address is 745 7th Avenue. So I am downslope from the property. And the reason, I am actually sitting in an airport right now. I couldn't get onto the call before then. My very grave concern is that what happened across the street at 312, and 312 was built with no engineering oversight because they just built straight up, and the two homes directly below it, or across the street from me, have had extreme cases of flooding and have spent a lot of money, a significant amount of money, since that dwelling at 312 Webb, built by this same builder, was done. And there is no recourse for the homeowners on the downslope side. So that the homeowners that are on the downslope side from 312, the 312 Webb, I'm talking about the home that was across the street, Webb Avenue, Alan Breda's old home. That's where there was extreme flooding below it when that property was purchased by someone else. Now, talking about 312, and there is a huge slope coming down, retaining walls, and a lot of land has to be moved in order to build these two homes, a lot of soil removal. And when you say a permit, and we're all extremely worried about it. There are 6 homes that will be affected by whatever happens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 homes that'll be affected by what happens at the 312 property. The other thing is that I'm not sure if it was mentioned already. As I said, I wasn't on the call, but all the trees were taken down at the property on Webb that this builder owned, and there was extreme flooding. And then on 312, I happened to be walking past with a neighbor, and I stopped, and there was no permit, and they were taking down trees and grinding down stumps. This to me is not a good way to start out this whole build of 2 homes, because I don't really have a lot of faith that this builder will do what is necessary for this place, since they've already cut down trees. So how are we going to be assured that anything that happens on that property will not affect the homes on the downslope side?
Mr. Barrett, you want to address that?
And Mr. Michael, you've already met with Jason from the Department of Public Works, is that correct?
That's correct.
On site?
On site.
Did you remove any trees?
The trees that were removed were all weeds or bushes, small, low bushes.
That is not true. That is not true.
Did,
I'm sorry.
did Jason have any comments to you that you did something improper?
No, sir.
Sir, there are fines that are being rendered onto this property. I watched them do this. They had no permit, and they were taking down large trees, and they even cut down branches on town trees. So I don't agree at all.
Ma'am, are you speaking about 312 Webb Avenue, the subject of the
I am. I was the one that called town to have them come stop these guys from cutting the trees down. I watched them put trees into the chipper. They also made cuts into burrow trees.
If
All right,
that's the case,
do you have any other questions or comments?
I guess I'm going to continue to state that I don't trust that something they're saying is, since they're already telling me they didn't do it, I don't trust that, because I was there. I just don't have assurances that whatever is done there will be done to help mitigate what will happen on the downslope side.
All right,
That's it.
anything further? All right, thank you. All right, I'm gonna try Mr. Manzelli again. If you could please unmute yourself, and you should be able to state your name and address.
Joe Manzelli, 789 6th Avenue. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Looks like it. I guess my question is for the engineer, is when you, if you're approved and that you subdivide this, the ordinance is 30% of the lot can be covered, correct? It just seems like there's not going to be enough room. And again, looking at your plans here, it looks like it's more than 30%, and I'm all for and putting two, up there. I'm just, hey, is it going to be less than 30% on those properties? And I can confirm with the other lady, no offense, Mr. Michael, some of it was weeds, but those other things, there were small trees, but they were coming down. So, but I guess if you could answer the question about the 30%, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're limited to 30% for the house, front walks, driveway, and then we're allowed an additional 5% for the rear yard. So we do not plan to exceed any setback. We don't plan to exceed the height nor any of the coverages.
I believe the confusion may lie in the fact that you've shown the potential footprint, which if filled to its maximum would exceed the 30%. I believe that might be the confusion.
That's the dotted pink line is the building envelope. That's where our building has to be. That's not going to be the size of the building.
Okay. So anyone else from the public, this is your chance to ask questions. Okay, we have another. Please state your name and address for the record. You can unmute yourself too.
Hi, Michael Hoffman. I live at 330 Webb Avenue in River Edge. So all our neighbors are concerned about the grade and the water runoff. And to sort of confirm some things that were talked about in the public section, I believe the house in reference was 327 Webb that was built by the same builder, in which the two adjacent houses that are downslope was 331 Webb and around the corner at 744 7th Avenue experienced flooding after that house was built. So that learning of that and then learning of the plans to subdivide 312, we show concerns with adherence to whatever the town and the board has in terms of ordinance for storm water drainage. With regard to the trees, I witnessed trees coming down, and I happen to know that to say that there was nothing done, it was only weeds, is not an accurate statement. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have another member. All right, you can unmute yourself and state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn Buller, and I am at 325 Webb Avenue here in River Edge. And I just want to voice my concern about the flooding situation. I am right next to the house that was built by the builder, and I know for a fact that our neighbors next door are constantly dealing with a lot of water issues. And it's concerning because these are all my neighbors. We've been here for over 25 years. And across the street is directly behind, where the properties are going to be built. And I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Oh, there's one other phone that's called in. If you are interested in making a comment, you can dial *9 on your telephone keypad. Doesn't look like it. So, oh, there we go. All right, so you have to dial *6 on your telephone to unmute yourself, and then you can state your name and address, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wayne Murphy, 300 Webb Avenue. I've probably been here the longest since 1951, and I've seen a lot of destruction of the forest and that sort of thing. So I'm concerned about the trees that are in the yard there. I also saw the tree trimmers had 3 very big trucks here, maybe 4. So I saw that work going on, but I don't know what they took. But you don't bring 4 trucks to take out some weeds. It's probably a done deal that it's going to be 2 houses, but I would prefer 1. And that's pretty much what I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now everyone has had an opportunity to talk, but I think Greg, that's Greg from Mr. Costa's office, and Jason from Mr. Costa's office. So that's everyone from the public, so we can close.
Okay, we need a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Okay,
Thank you. All in favor? We can take a voice vote, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we're closed to the public. Now, Ms. Donnelly, I guess we can, well, let's, should we be having any further discussion by the board members after they heard the public comments?
Unless somebody has a question.
Okay.
Mr. Michael raised his hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, I didn't build the house that they're mentioning on Webb, 327 Webb. That was not my company. Just
Okay,
for-
thank you.
You're welcome.
Just through the chair, very quickly, because I know there was a comment about the trees. I just got off the phone with the DPW director. So, Mr. Michael, what he told me just now is that you didn't go in for a permit yet. Is that true? I mean, that's what he just told me.
There's a shade and tree application.
Did you go to him for the permit though? Did you physically go?
It was
And-
submitted in the building department, which is what we were instructed to do.
Okay, because I literally just got off the phone and said you didn't bring it in, but it's in the building department?
See, yeah, that's right. It's
All
in the
right.
building department.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Back to you, Ms. Donnelly.
All right, so I just want to summarize what the applicant had agreed to during the course of the hearing. To come back to the board if needed for any variances for any development on the property. If the variances are needed, to obtain all necessary building and township permits, to work with the borough engineer regarding drainage and soil, and to work with the board planner and other borough professionals for any development of the property, to comply with the shade tree management shade tree committee regarding recommendations for tree removal and tree plantings. Agreed to secure the existing dwelling, either boarded up or otherwise secure it until demolition, to comply with the board planner's recommendations and comments in his report, including comments regarding demolition before perfecting the subdivision, and all the other comments that were discussed tonight. And
We were going to grant waivers. Should we have to include the waivers that we're talking about?
And the applicant and Mr. Barrett represented that the applicant would agree to comply with the subdivision plat requirements in the borough ordinance as part of compliance. Is that correct, Mr. Barrett?
And we'll amend the plans. That could be a condition of the approval, that those other 2 items for which we sought waivers will in fact be included.
Okay.
And Ms. Steinle, if I may,
Yep.
just one minor, well, maybe not minor, clarification. in talking about securing the property, you stated either boarded up or otherwise. But I think Mr. Merman,
Oh.
and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think Mr. Merman was very emphatic that he wanted it boarded up.
Be boarded up. Okay. I will put that in there, just boarded up. And also there was at the start of the public hearing, there was reference to block 302 lot 1, but the correct lot is lot 12, just for the record.
Ms. Dunn, can we have in there as well that we get those items before this is memorialized and in our hands, as we have asked other applicants?
Yep. Mr. Barrett, is that okay?
Yes.
All right. Okay, those were all my notes. I don't know if Mr. Barrett has a summation.
No, I think that, the applicant has demonstrated that he's willing to comply with all of the requirements of the ordinances. Although we requested a waiver, we agree that we'll locate the houses within 200 feet of the property to the best that we can, again, since we can't enter onto their property. And in addition, we'll provide, I think it's really just maybe 2 items that we don't have. That would be a water course and a culvert and a drain pipe. And if there's any wooded areas. Now, maybe you could help me though with wooded areas. Do we mean somebody's backyard? Or, what's the wooded area? Is it Van Solon Park? I mean, I'm not trying to be a wise guy. I'm really just trying to understand what you'd like to see.
I guess Mr. Costa, it's going to be reviewed by Mr. Costa, so.
But I mean, at this time, the board waived the requirement.
But we said we would do it though, okay? I mean, we're trying to cooperate. And if that's what you want to see, we're willing to show it, but I don't know what you mean. The ordinance is, as we've agreed, is deficient in many ways. Tell me what a wooded area is, and is that somebody's backyard? And we'll just show, again, without entering the property, we'll show that there's trees back. I don't know. Tell me what you want.
Well, I think, again, at this point, it's for this application, basically you're gonna do a deed to perfect the subdivision. But at this point, there's no improvements proposed or contemplated. Once that's done, then you would come back in and put your house, put your setbacks, put your coverages, put your drainage requirements, show whatever walls you're gonna build, whatever trees you're taking down. But I believe you're working with Jason from DPW, from what he just told me. Michael, he just called me back again, and he said the application is clear. You take it to 500, his office. So if you gave it to the building department, I don't know why you did that. It clearly says it on the application. But again, those requirements are waived. So.
All right, so I guess you don't need to provide any updated plans.
Not for this application.
Okay, that's fine.
Were we all aware that that was what was being voted on? We were told that we were voting on to allow it through for completeness. Now we're saying that they don't have to supply something that was part of the initial application?
If the board grants the waiver from the requirements, then the application can proceed forward because it's deemed complete and you granted the waiver from that requirement. If the board did not grant the waiver, then they could not deem it complete because they didn't provide the information.
So now they don't need to provide that because we got through completeness.
You're gonna approve basically the line to create the 2 lots. More importantly, what Tom said earlier, once that's perfected, that line goes through. If the house and the garage and the improvements on the property remain, that creates a problem with setbacks, with coverages, because it changes everything. But their plan clearly says to be removed. Tom asked the board to go one step further and say, that stuff has to be removed before you file the deeds and perfect the subdivision and create the 2 lots.
Hey,
They have to be.
Rob,
Yes.
are there any items that were waived with respect to completeness that you believe are like critical? That weren't on the survey that, you know, I can't tell from your letter exactly what items we're waiving. So is one of those items utilities or storm drainage facilities? Is that one of the items that's not shown on the survey that's required by the ordinance that they're?
Again, this is where I think we went back and forth today. And again, if I was hired to be in opposition of this application tonight, I'm just going to tell you this. Now, just hear me out. The ordinance clearly states, and I agree with Mr. Barrett, I think it needs to be modified because it doesn't differentiate from a minor to a major on the requirements of a plat. So if Mr. Barrett said, okay, it says an interesting thing. When you apply to the board, here's what's required. 3 copies of the application, 3 copies of the, 12 copies of the sketch plat, 3 copies of the application. And then it says at the time of filing, the application, but no less than 10 days prior to the hearing date, the applicant shall also file all plats, plans, maps, and other papers required by the virtue of any provision of the chapter and any rule of the board. So this is what I'm saying. So technically, is it preliminary and final, or do they have to come back for final? And that's what I said earlier.
All right, but your letter says that the ordinance requires that they show culverts and drain pipes, among other things.
Correct.
Is that what we're waiving?
No.
We're waiving that requirement? Okay.
Because they're not proposing any improvements at this point.
No, but isn't it existing conditions? We're talking about existing conditions, right, on the survey. It says existing and proposed.
Right.
Drain pipes, natural features.
That's part of the
culverts. So if any of those exist, I'm not saying they do or they don't, we're waiving the requirement for them to show that in their application.
Correct.
We waived that.
It's gone. Correct.
Thank you.
But what you will approve or disapprove tonight is a line to create 2 lots, 7,500 square feet. Now, if they decide to move forward and build on them or whatever they're going to do, then they're going to have to submit all the required information.
Okay.
And that's through the soil moving permit also.
And the existing property is going to be demolished.
So we don't have that,
because once you create that lot,
but we don't have that
that
information.
garage would have setbacks to that new lot line.
We're gonna vote on the subdivision tonight, and we don't have that information. We don't know if there's drainage pipes and we don't know if there's culverts. That was a decision made by the board when they voted to waive those requirements.
I think we're getting very blurry here. We waive those requirements for completeness. We can still vote this down. We haven't agreed to doing anything. It's up to us now to decide if we want.
But when you vote, you won't have that information, Mr. Craig.
Right, because and again, collectively or individually, you have to make the determination if you're comfortable with that or not. Right? We heard the testimony. We can make a decision. If your decision is, I'm not going to vote for the subdivision because I don't know enough about culverts and how it's going to impact us, then vote no. But
well, yeah, I won't know because I won't
the
know.
only thing we approved was waiving it.
I don't know if there's culverts or drainage pipes because the board decided to waive submittal of that as part of completeness determination.
Well, then councilman, vote no if you're not comfortable with it, and if it fails, then the applicant has to come back and re-provide the proper things that this board is.
I understand what the decision is that has to be made at this point. Thank you. What's the purpose, Mr. Moon? What's the purpose of requiring boarding up the structure? I mean, obviously, let me just finish. That house hasn't been occupied for over a year. And there are no broken windows and no broken doors. There's a broken storm door, I think, in one place. Yeah. All the other ways of entry are intact, as far as I know. I'm just worried about what that looks like in our neighborhood, having a boarded up house.
Well,
is that necessary? And I didn't hear anyone else on the board weigh in on that. I just
I-
want to make sure that's necessary.
I want to
Board-
eliminate, okay, I wanted to eliminate what I call an attractive nuisance. An attractive nuisance means that anybody can enter that dwelling, have any kind of activities, whatever they do today, and so forth, and it's basically for, community safety.
Okay, I
It-
just
it-
want you to understand, they'd have to break a window or knock down a door to do that.
Well, yes, right now, somebody can sneak in there and have a, party or whatever. It's more for community safety.
Yeah, I mean, the house has been standing there empty for over a year. And I'm just concerned about the aesthetics of having a boarded up house in our neighborhood.
Well,
It's up to you.
there's no reason why the boarding can't be painted green or whatever, so it's not so intrusive visually. But the purpose was one of community safety. So that was that. Okay. Well, I have the floor here. My interpretation of the wood, the trees, the tree comment within 200 feet was natural wooded trees. If there was a natural wood lot or what have you nearby, that be indicated. That's the way I look at it, Mr. Barrett.
I would agree with you, but I just wanted to make sure.
No, okay. And I think that's what that was. Mr. Barrett, we're gonna be hanging curtains in the window before we get done tonight. Is there some way that you can make that closure of the building look presentable to the neighbors in the community? Whether you paint it green or whatever, all right? Could you do
David,
that, please?
That's on you, David. What do you think? Can you do something there to?
I agree that it's really not, Mr. Councilman Glass, that it's not really a look for River Edge. As a former resident of River Edge, it's not a really good look.
If perhaps Mr. Merman.
There is an orange fence that's around 4 feet high that we can secure the property with the sill fence that we usually use in construction. In terms of becoming a public nuisance, with all due respect, I do pass by the house several times a day since I do live around 10 minutes away from the property. And if there is some kind of nuisance, I'm sure our neighbors that are there that have paid attention to the trees and the activity around the property would definitely call the cops if there is something. My opinion is I will do whatever the board requests of me. I just think for the town, it doesn't look good. I did live in the town at 241 Beach Court for a long time, so I am a resident of River Edge.
Having been a teenager in a similar.
I understand, yeah. Of course,
Okay.
especially these days with what's allowed. Of course.
Teenager in another era. Okay.
Of course.
I really feel that we need something solid and secure, and I appreciate your security system of passing by, but I feel rather strong about the safety of the community. So,
Mr. Merman, would it be satisfactory to state that if a problem developed, now Councilman Glass points out that it's been a year and there have been no incidents. If there's an incident, then Mr. Michael will go and board it up in an aesthetic manner. But until then,
I kind of stand on what I said. It's
okay,
not going to hurt.
I just think that, you know, if nothing has happened for a year, probably another 6 months. But again, if that's the will of the board, so be it. I'm just saying that it's not a done deal if he doesn't do it tomorrow. If you want it done a month from now because a bunch of kids had a party after a football game, that's all.
Well, right now I'm going to leave it in the motion, And, of course, like I said, having been, a youth many years ago, I remember your football party type of, adventures, and I'd rather leave it this way. So,
Did they
having said
notice,
that,
did they notice multiple horses back in your day as a youth?
I'm
Never
not,
mind,
read,
forget it. It was
read my book when it comes out, Mr. Barrett.
a poor attempt at a joke.
I know, and so was the book. Okay, all right. So, are there any last comments by any of the board members before we take a motion on this? Okay, we need a motion on quality. Let me get this. Quality Home Developers LLC, 312 Webb Avenue, Block 302, Lot 12, for the subdivision as discussed and enumerated. Does somebody care to make that motion to accept what Ms. Steinle just set forth and what we discussed? So I'm ready for a motion, and then we'll have a second and vote on it.
I'll make the motion that we approve the subdivision with subject to all the conditions that were recited by Ms. Steinle.
Thank you. We need a second. No second. All right, to move it along, I'll make the second.
No, I seconded it. Are you sure?
I couldn't hear you,
Second
Miss.
was-
Oh, sorry.
Thank you,
Alright, so
Mr.
a motion to approve the subdivision with the conditions that were previously described. Mr. Merman,
Yes,
Mr. Pfeffer,
Yes.
Mr. Cray,
Yes.
Mr. Kanigo,
No,
Councilman Glass,
And
I'm sorry, you're on mute.
I just want to say real quick, I've seen Mr. Michael's work and he's a top-notch builder. We couldn't be more fortunate.
Thank you, Mr. Gus. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate the
It's
kind
the
words.
truth.
Thank
But
you.
I'm concerned, as you all know, that we don't have all the information that we should have potentially about this property. So I'm going to vote no.
All right, and Mr. Gibbons?
No.
All right, the motion fails.
all right.
So then may I propose that the two items, and I believe that's all that are required under the ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Behrens or Mr. Acosta, will be placed onto the plans? Is there anything else? Just so that, I mean, the councilman just voted no based on the fact that that information isn't there. So we'll put the information there. I don't think it affects my opinion. It doesn't affect the application one bit because it's not on site, but we'll comply. Is there anything else though?
Ms. Steinle, he'll have to renotice, correct?
Yep, I think so.
All right.
Fine.
So then you'll have to schedule a new
Well,
hearing.
could we hear, Mr. Chairman, is there anything else that is going to be required? I'd like to get this done once and for all.
I wish I could answer that, but you heard all the testimony I heard.
Well, I know, but again, if we comply with the ordinance. Now, Mr. Costa spoke about drainage and things of that nature. I don't believe that's in the ordinance. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know.
I guess, Mr. Barrett, we'll have to take it offline and talk about what you need to do to submit
Okay.
it. If we can have a meeting with Mr. Costa, Mr. Behrens, just to make sure that everything, and
That's fine.
Mr. McClellan, and we can just have a call or a Zoom or something.
Okay, fair enough. We'll schedule something.
And you'll
Thank
have
you.
to work. You'll have to work with Mr. Alter regarding a calendar.
Yep,
Thank you.
okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All
Thank
right,
you.
anything further to come before the board tonight? Okay. All right, can we close the meeting?
Yep, if there's nothing else.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, can we take a voice vote, Ms. Steinle?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, meeting's closed.